Hi guys, and welcome to today's sit down video wherein basically I'm going to be telling you every single book I gave 5 stars in 2024, basically last year, because I read 125 books and I can count on one hand how many books I gave 5 stars. It's a little ridiculous, but let's just directly get into this video because these books deserve their own, consolidated spot somewhere on the internet, and that's going to be in the form of this video, so let's just directly get into it. Before we get into the books, I'm really quickly just gonna say, I read 125 books, but me as a reader, I'm so picky to the extent where I give nearly every single book I read like 2 or 3 stars. Not because they are bad, it's because I can get really easily icked out while I'm reading books, and anything about it can literally just break the book for me. So the fact that I gave these books 5 stars essentially means they're perfect in my eyes. They are my god tier books, and I'd recommend them to anyone and everyone. So if you're here for some recommendations, you'll probably get a few out of them anyway. And let's start off with my first book that I gave 5 stars in 2024. The funniest part is I didn't give it 5 stars up until July because I didn't find a single 5-star read until July. So for the first 6 months of the year, I basically thought that listen, there's no prospect of me getting a 5-star in 2024. But what changed that, and what was the first book I gave 5 stars, is Second Chance Summer by Matson. This is set during summertime, so if you want to read it, definitely pick it up during summertime. But also if you're gonna go ahead and get yourself a copy of this book, please get yourself a box of tissues as well, because the second half of this book I was sobbing 200 pages straight, bawling my eyes out, fat tears rolling down my face, ugly crying so hard. This I think might have emotionally broken me because I've never read anything like it. I don't think I ever will. I don't think I've given such like an intense emotional reaction to any book, and if this pulls it out of me, this is crazy. Me as a reader, I give 5 stars to books that draw really intense emotional reactions out of me. So if I was really happy while I was reading the book, or if I was really sad, it's probably going to be 5 stars. And this was kind of like a mixture of both, bordering on sad, but also there were really happy, wholesome bits that I enjoyed and loved. It essentially follows this girl called Taylor. She's like a teenager. I believe she's like 17 or something like that. So she's very young, but then her life is upended because her family gets really sad news. They find out that the father, her dad, is actually going to be passing away in 3 months. He's got only 3 months left to live because he's got cancer, and that's what the doctor's last predicament was. So essentially the family decides collectively as a unit that they want to spend the last 3 months they have with their dad at their summer beach house to kind of make up for memories, because they used to go there every year when they were kids, and they kind of want to relive the childhood nostalgia one last time with the father. So they all go there on like a little family trip for the summertime, except here's the problem. The last time Taylor had been there was when she was really young, and because of that she kind of messed up on a couple of her relationships there. So the community there doesn't really want Taylor to be there because she messed up the last time around, and she's not really welcome anymore. And so because of that, she's going on with that in the background. There's her dad's illness. You watch his condition degrade day by day. You watch him get sicker and sicker, and it just gets sad. But also when the happy bits start hitting you, it's so nice because they just hit so much harder because of that. And I will say, when the sad bits hit in this book, they don't relent. It just keeps going on, and there's so much that comes back in this to hit you in the face that it really hurts. I will say the length of this book is perfect for the emotional reaction that it gives, and I sometimes I wish there was more, because I definitely read more of this, but I feel like I'd also be crying if I read more of it. And with such a pretty cover, you wouldn't really expect the amount of tears that this actually drew from me. This, for good reason, was the first book I gave 5 stars in 2024. And can I quickly just take a second to talk about the romance subplot, because this wasn't the main part of the book. I'd call this like a general fiction, but the romance in it, as a hopeless romantic girly, my heart was screaming. It essentially is like second chance childhood friends to lovers, my favorite tropes ever. And so when they hit in place, it was so fun watching her kind of develop new links, watching the family kind of acclimate to everything that's going on. It hit, and it hit so hard, and I really enjoyed reading it, but I don't know if I'll ever reread it, just because it hit me too hard to the point where I was emotionally drained for literally half a month. And I don't know if I want that again, but at the same time there's so much about it that I want to relive. So maybe I'm crossing out my fingers, I might do that again this summer, but we shall see. And so because I was so emotionally drained and sucked out into this like black hole after reading this book, I put it down. I was done with it, literally took a couple days out to rest, but then after that I figured I want to get back into reading with something happy and something that literally just makes me feel alright again. And so I figured I'd just pick the basic palate cleansery romance, except by some cosmic joke, the book gods decided that, you know what, she didn't have a 5-star read for 6 months, let's give her 2 back to back. So right after I finished reading this book, the next book I picked up was also 5 stars somehow. It was Begin Again by Emma Lord. It follows this girl called Andy who kind of registers in this like competitive college or whatever, and she gets in. And now background on Andy, her mom had passed away when she was really young, so she never actually got to live with her mother and, you know, spend her childhood with her. So she kind of registered in that competitive college in the first place to kind of be closer to her mom, because that's where her mom used to go to college when her mom was younger. And so she has all these like laid out plans structured around what her mom had done that she wants to kind of recreate and relive to kind of be closer to her mom. Except when she gets there, her plans are kind of thrown off because there's other different things going on that kind of mess with it. And in the background there's like college games essentially, wherein they have to be running around kind of trying to get ribbons that help them get into secret societies, which she wants to be part of because her mom was part of too. Except again in the background there's different things going on. And with this author's work, I have noticed, because I've read this book by her and her new release of this year, that she kind of has like a YA story with like a slow burn romance, which nothing happens between the love interest and Andy until like 90%, and that's literally my favorite kind of romance ever because there's so much emotional building in this. But then not just that, in the background there was the whole aspect of the college games, and with this author's work there's always something going on with the college or whatever. Here it was like a challenge kind of thing, but then, you know, there's also like a revolt kind of happening, there's secret societies or whatever, and she's having something else go on in the background in terms of secretive stuff too. And then not just that, you have, you know, friendships and other relationships that are really well explored and developed in this. It's really wholesome, it's really sweet, it's YA, but it's YA done correct, and I enjoyed it so much. I feel like I was smiling the entire time, and this really pulled me out of my rut, because if I hadn't have read this, I would have gone into the worst reading slump of my life. And you know, I have such amazing feelings related to this book. The main love interest in this book, this guy called Milo, essentially has his own coffee blend that he makes, and that's how I market this book to everyone I speak to about it, because that is such a selling point. He's such a green flag, he's a green forest, forget that. And then, you know, with everything that's going on, this was the perfect book to read. This is very fall-esque because, you know, there's a lot going on, start of the school year, the outdoor competitions that make it feel so, but you can also read it any time of the year. And it is the perfect rom-com if you want something that just makes you feel giddy and happy like those 2000s rom-com movies do. And you know, it was a great good old time. After that, I feel like my reads just keep getting flipped on like other ends of the spectrum, because that was such a fun, happy, you know, cute, wholesome romance. Right after that, we have the most gut-wrenching book ever. I'm talking about Pretty Girls by Karin. Before I go ahead and talk to you about this book, I'm quickly just going to say, in no shape, way or form am I asking you to read this. If you take the recommendation from this video, I'm not specifically asking you to read this book. I will never recommend this to anyone in my life, because if you're reading this, check trigger warnings. It's a very dense book. It's like a thriller, but also it kind of follows a family's grief over losing their daughter. There's a lot that goes into it, and I would not ask anyone to read it because there's too much that goes on. I feel like this has traumatized me. It internally scarred me for a whole month after I read it, for good reason. And so I wouldn't ask you to read it, but if you're a woman, I would strongly suggest that any woman should be, you know, asked to read this book at least once in her lifetime, because it's something I personally feel like every woman should read. This book essentially follows this woman called Claire Scott. Something happens, her husband goes missing, and then something also happens. So her husband's disappearance essentially kickstarted a bunch of events, one of which includes the disappearance of this like teenage girl called, I think, Anna Kilpatrick, if I remember correctly, because I have been thinking about this book every single day of my life since the day I, you know, finished it out. But Anna's disappearance essentially reminds Claire of a different disappearance. When Claire was younger, her older sister Julia went missing and she was never found. The family never got conclusion over what happened to Julia, and so there's similar circumstances following both of their disappearances. They were both teenagers. There's different things going on in the background that kind of coincide, and Claire suddenly starts to suspect what's going on in the background. And then also along with the husband's disappearance, there's a lot of things that come into connect, and if I'm not wrong, she kind of goes seeking answers to kind of figure out what's going on. And as she's doing that, there's, you know, things coming to the light. The family is being torn apart, having to go through the grievances of what they suffered all those years ago yet again, and it's very deep. Again, keep in mind, would not ask anyone to read this because there's a lot that goes into really vivid descriptions and depth in this book. It's honestly disturbing. I don't think I'm ever rereading this in my life, but I needed a physical in my life because at some point, again, I need to give this to all the women in my life to read. Because I will say, at the time of me reading it and finishing it out, I did not speak to any men in my vicinity, did not even want to surround myself with them for a whole week. Its effect on my real life is honestly astonishing, and the fact that even though it's like something that follows like the grief of a family being pulled apart, I cried to it. It's not really a thriller, but I cried to it regardless. It really took a huge emotional toll on me, and so I would not recommend. But also, this is another book that I gave 5 stars because it doesn't deserve anything less. And like I said, I think about it nearly daily, which is crazy. Honestly, that's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna put it down because looking at it now, thinking back on the circumstances now, I honestly feel myself wanting to throw up, cry really hard because of the events that go through in this book. And the problem is, what you read about in this book obviously happens in real life too, and that's really saddening to think about stuff like that happening to real human beings out there. So it obviously opens your eyes up to the realities of the world. But then again, I wish I had my rose-colored glasses back on, the ones I had before I read this book, because reading this book has literally altered and changed me as a person. I don't think I look at my surroundings the way I used to. And so we're going to be done with this book right now because I don't want like an emotional episode, but at the same time, I gave it 5 stars for good reason, and I will always stand by my rating. Next book, again, flipping on the whole spectrum of emotions, is not so much of like a deep book in comparison to the previous one, but also this is one of the best books I've ever read in my lifetime. This is Beach Read by Emily Henry. Come yell at me in the comments. It took me so long to get around to finally reading it for the first time, and now that I have, I'm completely obsessed. I think in the following week or so, I'm actually going to be recording a reading vlog, reading more of Emily Henry's books, and I'm so excited because this is one of the best romances I've read in my life. If you've heard that one quote, "When I watch you sleep, I feel overwhelmed that you exist," it came from this book. Gus Everett is one of my top book boyfriends ever, and so let's talk about it. If you don't already know what it is about, it essentially follows this woman called January. She kind of moves into her dad's, I guess, like summer house or whatever, and living as her neighbor opposite is Gus Everett. He was like her college nemesis rival or whatever, except now they're both struggling writers. They're both broke. They both need like a book complete by the end of the summer because they have like writing publishing deals or something like that, and they cannot break their contracts. So they come up with this deal between themselves. It's like a challenge wherein whoever publishes or finishes writing a book first is the winner, except they're going to be swapping their genres. So January, who writes romance, is going to write literary fiction, and Gus, who writes literary fiction, is going to be writing January's genre, romance. And because they're switching up, they're trying to figure out what goes where. They're essentially going to help each other kind of explore those genres. So they're going to go figure out what comes next and what, and teach each other how to write those genres. And as they do that, they start falling for each other, and there's so much going on in the background. I wouldn't necessarily call this a romance. It's more literary women's fiction, but the romance subplot in this was so good. I know I'll never read anything like this book in my lifetime, and I've already come to terms with that fact, so I hold this really near and dear to my heart. If you don't like it, don't tell me, because I don't think I'll be able to handle that. It's honestly one of the best things I've ever read, and if you have to, please go read it. This is, again, like I said, me as a hopeless romantic. This had me literally giggling on one page, crying the next, ripping my heartstrings out because it was so good, and it's so worth reading. Read it in the summertime if you want, but also it's like a cozy comfort book to me that I would recommend you read in any season at this point because it's worth it any time of the year, and I had a great time reading. And finally, to the last book I gave 5 stars in 2024. It's the Book of Doors. This is like a magical fantasy realism book. So again, we've got like a whole huge spectrum of different books that I gave 5 stars. The most unexpected ones on my TBR, never saw them coming as 5 stars, but here we are. They did get 5. If you're a book lover, I would recommend you pick this book up because essentially it follows this story about this girl called Cassie. She kind of works at this bookstore, and one day as she's closing up her shift, there's this old man who kind of visits the shop, and he actually passes away. So in the very first chapter, you kind of read about the old man dying, and so Cassie is there kind of trying to figure out what happens next. And as soon as that is sorted with, as soon as his body is taken away by the ambulances or whatever, she actually figures that he's left her this book behind. She didn't even know him that well, but he left her a book saying for Cassie, and when she takes it back home, she opens it in her apartment with her roommate. They're drunk, they're speaking about this like trip they had a few years ago to Italy. She opens a door handle, suddenly her door transports her to the experience in Italy that they were speaking about, and from what she figures out, the book that she was given is called the Book of Doors. If you hold it in your hand and if you think about a specific door, you can kind of go to that place using any door around you. So for example, me in my bedroom right now, if I had the Book of Doors in my hand, and if I opened my bedroom door, I could literally walk out to anywhere. I could picture the bookstore and suddenly I'm transported there through the book. And so she uses it to kind of go on these expeditions throughout the world, kind of having fun with her roommate, except someone sees her doing so, and as it turns out, it's this man who is called the librarian. He kind of gets in touch with them and lets them know that there are some people called book hunters, because this isn't the only magical book in the world. There's other magical books. So there's Book of Pain, Book of Sadness, Book of Anger, Book of Health, and all of these books together are actually hunted by these people called book hunters, who kind of want to grow their collection to the point where they can essentially dominate the world and take over the control of the world if they get these books. And so he kind of takes books in his library to safeguard them against book hunters, except he lets them know that if their Book of Doors falls in the wrong hands, someone could use the Book of Doors to open up the door to his library, take all of his books that he's been safeguarding for centuries now, and then use that to kind of take control of the world, and suddenly their lives are in danger because there's book hunters after them. There's all these trips they're going on. It's so fun, it's so wholesome. One of the best books I read last year because there's so much to it, and one day I hope the author makes this like a series, because that would be so fun to read about. I can't wait to see more in these characters' lives, and this was the perfect book to read. I actually had issues kind of trying to get this book in the mail a couple times, which is why this video got delayed recording, but now that it finally came like a week ago, it gave me the perfect chance to sit down and talk about it, because I refused to film this video without having a physical of this book in my hand, simply because I need to be ranting about how much I love it, and as soon as I'm done, my sister is actually going to be reading the same copy as well. So the timing is perfect. I had to speak about this book. This book also really portrays what I love in magical realism. It was great to read, and the romance subplot in this wasn't really there, but when it kind of came in, it was fun. The friendships in this, the loyalties, the other themes in it too, honestly great, and I loved every second. I'm so happy I read this book, and I'm so happy I kind of lived through the emotions of going through it, because I believe it was like 400-500 pages, but when I read it, it felt like 100 because I literally speed through everything. It was so good and I had a great time reading. Now really quickly, I don't necessarily know if these books qualify for 5 stars, but I want to speak about them anyway. The first book I actually gave 5 stars in 2024 was back in January, but this was a reread for me. So I read A Christmas Carol originally when I was in middle school, and I reread it last year at the beginning of the year and gave it 5 stars. So it doesn't necessarily count as a 5 star for 2024 because it was a reread for me, but I'm going to include it as part of the video anyway, because it's still a book I gave 5 stars in the year of 2024. It essentially follows this man called Scrooge. We all know about him. He's not the best guy. He's a miser. He's going through life not really caring about repercussions on others and not really helping them, especially when he has the means to do so. But then one day when he comes back to his apartment, he's kind of confronted with the ghost of his business partner, who lets him know that the way he's been living his life is not conducive, and because of what he's been doing about or whatever, he's gonna have severe consequences to kind of pay for when he dies. And so his business partner Jacob Marley kind of lets him know that, hey, I'm trying to save you from the fate that I'm enduring right now in death. And what he does is kind of sends 3 ghosts to meet Scrooge, the ghost of Christmas present, past and future, to kind of show Scrooge all these memories of the past that he's forgotten, the kind of man he used to be, the kind of boy he was when he was younger, present to kind of show him the people around him, the way they're suffering, and future, what's going to be his fate one day if he doesn't change his ways. And this kind of opens Scrooge's eyes to kind of, Christmas miracles and kind of helping the people around him. We all know the story, and the way it takes place is so incredible because I've, again, never read anything like it. When I read it in middle school, it didn't, account for the way this made me feel this time around. I don't know why. I was sobbing my eyes out to it. I don't think I felt the whole impact of it when I read it in middle school, and rereading it now, I felt everything, and I'm so happy I did, because I never thought that, on my bingo list for last year, I'd be checking off Crying to a Classic, but that did end up happening anyway. I'm so happy I read this. I'm so grateful to have gone through it, and I'm trying to make it like a whole thing wherein I reread this every single year, so, I can relive the Christmas magic again, because something about this book screams comfort, wholesomeness, and warmth to me. It's kind of like home, and I love it, and so it had to be here. Now, the last 2 books I'm speaking about in this video, I didn't give 5 stars in 2024. They weren't originally 5, but I have gone ahead and reread them since. There's actually a separate video of me rereading these books, and I gave it 5 stars upon my reread. So the first time I read The Paradise Problem was actually in the month of May last year, around the time it came out, because I was sent an ARC of it. This physical copy I bought with my own money. I was sent like a Kindle ARC, and so at the time of me reading it, it was a 4.75, so close to 5. But now that I have gone ahead and reread it in honor of Valentine's Day last month in February, I gave it 5 5 stars because it just felt like it. And so it was a book I originally read in 2024, but I didn't give it 5 stars at the time. I gave it 5 stars now upon my reread. It essentially follows this woman called Anna Green. She's kind of going through, hardships in life because she's literally the portrait of struggling artist. She doesn't have a lot of money and she kind of needs it because she needs to help her dad's hospital treatments. And now comes in Liam. He's kind of like this rich guy. His family owns like a popular supermarket chain called Weston's or whatever, and so there's lots of stuff going on in the background with him. But what you need to know is that Anna and Liam used to be married 5 years ago for student housing. So they're just random people who married each other to get student housing for cheaper or whatever, and they went their separate ways. But 5 years later now, Liam walks back into Anna's life when she's struggling as an artist and kind of lets her know that he needs her help. He's essentially paying her to still fake being his wife because, as it turns out, they were never actually separated. The divorce never went through because his family has this condition wherein if he wants his inheritance money, he needs to be married for 5 years. So he didn't really tell her or whatever. They were still married and they had only a few months left to their marriage, except now he's coming and enlisting her help because his younger sister Charlie is getting married at this like private island or whatever in Singapore, and his family is starting to question how legit his marriage is. So essentially he's asking Anna to come to the wedding to kind of pretend to be his wife just so the family is convinced, and he gets his full inheritance money when it's time and they can walk their separate ways. He's paying her to do so. She's ready to do it. It's fake dating, marriage of convenience or whatever, set on a tropical island amongst like the richest, brattiest people. It's so funny. It's so ridiculous. You've got the quirky main character, you've got the spoony love interest, you've got the classic Christina Lauren kind of book. They're my favorite authors for a good reason. I'm so mad at myself for not having given this book 5 stars the first time I read it because it deserves nothing less, and I'm so happy I reread it this time around. I actually plan on taking this with me again this year in the month of May when I go off for vacation. So that's going to be my 3rd time rereading it in the span of literally a year, just because of how good that is. And me as a reader, I occasionally, very rarely reread books, so the fact that this is making me do that and want to do that is incredible. It's 5 stars for good reason. It had to be part of this video. And lastly, we have another book I read. I think I read this either in July or in August of last year. It was 4.5 at the time of me reading it, but rereading it now, I had like a whole new profound love for it. It's 5 stars again. I read it again for the 2nd time last month in February for the same romance book video, and it gave it 5 stars again for good reasons. This book is essentially called Nora Goes Off Script. It follows this woman, Nora Hamilton, who is kind of, going through a lot in her life. Firstly, can I just quickly speak about the fact that it doesn't follow the general, age criteria for romance books, because this was the first time I was reading a romance wherein our characters are in their 40s. They have, whole other lives going on out of it, and so that makes me appreciate this book even more. Basically, Nora's husband walks out on her. She's kind of separated from him now, except he left his 2 kids behind with her, and now her heart is broken. She's kind of struggling. So she writes this story because she's a writer about the whole thing that happened to her, except it's fictionalized, and it gets picked up to be made like a movie because it literally goes viral or something like that. And so Hollywood comes to her backyard to essentially record her movie out. She's being paid spectacularly. Her life is back on track again. She's finally starting to relive and relearn how to navigate and find herself and re-explore who she was before she got entangled in that toxic marriage, and kind of come to the terms to the fact where now she doesn't have to be financially dependent on someone else anymore. Her financial resources aren't like strained or whatever, and so she's going through all of that. She's grappling with a lot, and as that's happening in the background, in her backyard, she's actually got a tea house as shown on the cover where the whole movie is being featured, where they're actually recording the movie. So while they're doing all of that, the main actor for the movie, Leo Vance, who is essentially playing the part of her husband in the story, kind of comes to stay there, except as the movie crew wraps up, they're done recording there, he kind of strikes this deal up with Nora that he's going to pay her to kind of keep living in the tea house or whatever, because he's going with his own set of things happening in his personal life that he kind of wants to get away from. He wants just like a little bit of like a break, and he loves the tea house. He just wants to be there, and she doesn't mind the extra money because she has 2 kids to look after. She's got other bills to pay, and so she doesn't like him, but she agrees to it. And as things progress, you start liking him as a character too, because from the beginning, I will say, I hated him as a love interest. The first chapter, I was just like, no way I'm gonna like this book. I gave it 5 stars because the way Annabel Monaghan makes you love these characters is unmatched. This isn't the kind of book wherein from page 1 they're gonna fall for each other, love each other, be together like the typical romance. You don't like him, and he slowly starts to grow on you as a character, and as you're going through with that, This book is everything. I will never read anything like it. Again, come to terms with that fact. Again, I also want to reread this in the summertime because it's such a comfort book to me. This screams home because there's so much about it that for some reason really, hit me with an emotional impact, and for some reason also made me feel such heavy, strong feelings that I otherwise don't really feel with basic romances. But then again, this is more like a literary fiction book with a romance subplot that kind of solidified Annabel Monaghan in my top 5 favorite authors ever, because this is the kind of, book I love reading. This one, I feel like the romance in it is built up so well, but then also there's other things going on in Nora's background. There's a lot of different themes of like motherhood and self-exploration and kind of learning to live your life again, and appreciating the love and joy and beauty of life. And for some reason, again, this book makes me romanticize so much. It's hardly 200 pages, but the impact it delivers is so amazing that I loved it. Annabel Monaghan, the author, has this way of writing wherein she writes exactly the way it should be done. So it's not excess or anything, but it's not lacking either. She just writes emotions the way they should be, and the way she writes human emotions is everything. This book made me feel everything in the emotional range on the spectrum for good reason, and so it had to be a 5 stars rereading this the second time around, and it was just perfect. The length, again, I can't wait to reread this. It's 5 stars for good reason, and now this was the last book I gave 5 stars that I had originally read in 2024. And so this is basically the combined list of every book I gave 5 stars in 2024, be it new books I read in 2024, rereads, or rereads now looking back that were 5 stars for me. Hopefully you got like a recommendation or 2 out of this video, because again, it follows basically every genre that I read. We have a fantasy here, we have a bunch of romances, literary women's fiction with romance subplot, we have the most gruesome mystery thriller ever. There's a lot to it, there's a classic. So again, hopefully it appealed to someone in someone's interest range or whatever. Hopefully you guys enjoyed regardless. And that's it for today's mini, sit down video. Hopefully you guys had a fun time coming along with me, speaking about my love for these books. And now I'm gonna go grab a drink of water because I feel so dehydrated. So that's it for this vlog. Hopefully I'll see you guys very soon in my next video, and hopefully you guys had a fun time coming along with me for this one. If you did, like, comment, share, subscribe. I'll see you soon. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and until then, bye.